Hello, my chicklets. Thank you for stopping by. You may have noticed that this video is coming out on Friday and not on Wednesday, and that is because I'm once again doing a featured writer, which means we'll have an extra video on Fridays for the rest of this month. All of the stories in March are going to be written by Lost in Scribbles, one of my friends who is an amazing writer. Make sure to check the link in the description to find all of their socials, and let me jump into Truth Hurts, Doesn't It? As soon as the veins in his toes and feet started to tingle annoyingly, Logan knew it was about time he took a walk. However unjustified it felt to leave his desk and work behind before it was finished, he had to convince himself that figuratively working himself to the bone wouldn't do him nor his work any good. He'd take 15 minutes, at most, to stretch his legs, get the circulation flowing before continuing. As he got up from his desk chair with strained muscles, Logan became aware of how badly his body needed some proper movement to get his essence pumping. The few steps towards his door already made a considerable difference in clearing his head. Perhaps he'd simply grab a glass of water from the kitchen, along with a cup of coffee, though if he would get coffee, he would need to have a form of nutrition to go along with it. Aside from early mornings, it wasn't desirable to drink coffee on an empty stomach. Logan glanced at his watch as he walked down the hallway, noticing how it was already much later in the afternoon than he realized. How long had he been working? The others have been surprisingly docile and quiet, too. His foot bumped into something as he was about to turn around the corner, or rather, someone. Logan flinched back a step as he worriedly caught a glimpse of just what the nose of his shoe hit, a bowler hat, which now had a dent in it, but more importantly... Janice? What happened? Can you hear me? Logan crouched down in front of a raggedly panting and shivering Janus, laying on his right side almost curled up into a ball with one of his knees just about touching his chin, both of his arms close to his chest, his hands violently tugging at the chain clasp of his capelet. The sharply edged corner of the wall was cutting into his spine with how strenuous he was rubbing against it. Suddenly overcome with a distressing amount of uncertainty and bewilderment at the situation, Logan's first thought was to slowly drag him further away from the wall, preventing any more harm to his body, as he was shaking so heavily that he might dig his back into the wall's edge again. Janice, are you panicking? Did you... Logan wanted to continue asking questions, still unable to wrap his mind around what was happening. How did he lose his focus so quickly after getting away from his work for only a minute? He needed to focus. And then his eyes zoned in on the scaled side of Janice's face that was visible. Rather, whatever was left of his scales. An abundance of them were tearing, wilting away, peeling off as if an older layer of skin was starting to shed. Nothing happened. I'm just so... No, I'm just... Janice muttered, barely able to form words. There was something very grating about the way he spoke, utterly powerless against whatever his body was doing. Logan cursed at the amount of seconds he remained frozen in place, racking his brain, thinking about what to do. Ultimately, he decided to crawl closer in front of him, to take a better look at his face, his knees just about touching Janice's. Logan took a breath before laying one hand on the deceitful side's shoulder and rubbing his other over his scaled cheek. The unnatural sensation of the scales so easily peeling off of him from a simple touch of his fingertips. Slimy and tattered, mixed in with sweat glistening all over Janice's cheeks and forehead. Logan became even more hesitant to move at all. What if his interference only made it worse? What would be the best course of action? He had never seen Janice in such a state before. How can I help you? Please tell me how I can help you. Logan tried, his voice already shaking, his fingers hovering on Janice's cheek as his moist grasp warmed Logan's already clammy palm. He rubbed Janice's shoulder calmly, but the trembling and heaving wouldn't stop. I'm fine. No, I should be fine, Janice muttered again. his eyelids fluttering open and closed repeatedly. Why did he have so much trouble speaking? Logan leaned his face in closer, trying his best to seek out eye contact for any kind of answer, any kind of clue as to what he should do. He caught himself thinking he shouldn't have left his room to take a walk at all. With his work, Logan at least knew what he was doing. He strongly disliked not knowing what he was doing. I'm not doing okay. It's really hot. I can't get through this alone. Janus panted, stressing certain words like he normally would, speaking in lies and contradictions and riddles, as if he was trying to imitate his usual way of speaking, but being unable to. Was this a result of his shedding Logan saw happening? You're not alone. I'm here. I'll help you. No need to worry. Logan attempted to calm him, though he had doubts he was getting through to Janus at all. He is supposed to be the level-headed one, especially in distressing situations like this, so why couldn't he think of anything faster? Not doing okay. It's really hot. Hot. Would that mean Janus needed it colder? To cool down? Logan didn't even know if he was figuratively grasping at straws, but he had to do something. He had to know. Let me take some layers off of you, to cool you down, Logan answered with an even pace in his words, as he finally found some sense of calm in knowing what steps to follow now. Janus was feeling hot. Judging from his profuse sweating and tugging at his chain clasp, he would simply have to take this step by step. First would be to get his capelet off. Logan retrieved his hands shortly, his right hand still covered in loose and slimy scales that had gotten detached. Not bothering to wipe, Logan took hold of both of Janus's shoulders, the right one difficult to grab as he was leaning his whole weight on it on the floor. Carefully, he began to sit Janus up straight, supporting his back and waist, scooching them both more to the left so that Janus had the chance to lean his back against the plain wall from a safe distance of the sharp-edged corner. Despite his disheveled state, Janus managed to lift himself up with Logan's support, readjusting his legs to loosely fold them under him as he was sitting. I will take your capelet off now, okay? Logan prompted, grabbing Janus's hands that were still strenuously holding on to the clasps. Without looking, Janus nodded. As drops of sweat and loose scales fell off on Logan's hands, he poured all his focus in undoing the clasps and pulling the capelet away from behind Janus. Then he grabbed him by the shoulders again to lean him back against the wall, after laying the folded-up capelet next to them. Janus's breath rhythm was still highly irregular. The rim of his hat continued to obscure Janus's line of sight as well. Might as well take that off too. The next step. Logan couldn't deny his need to look Janus in the eye as well, to truly see if what he was doing was actually making him feel better. He took deep breaths to make sure his own breathing wouldn't go off pace, taking the hat to place it on top of the capelet. Strands of Janus's hair were sticking to his clammy forehead, lots of plucks wildly peeling out in different directions. The always composed and neatly dressed image of Janus, the one that would always visualize in Logan's mind, however contradictory to his nature, was starting to unveil. The Janus before him now, his eyes starting to flutter open, though completely glossed over with an aloof gaze, reddened, glistening skin apart from the tattered layer of scales dripping off his cheek, his body shrinking in on itself as Janus pulled his hands close to his chest. He looked immeasurably vulnerable. I can take these off myself, Janus insisted, glancing down at his gloves while constantly shifting his eyes up to Logan and back at his hands. Logan had to restrain himself from helping, watching in a whirlwind of frustration and his own pinch of helplessness as Janus hopelessly picked at his gloves with thumb and index finger. Likely that was all the strength his body had left, and yet he seemed to try and convince himself he was strong enough to withstand this alone, even though he clearly asked for help earlier. Why was his way of speaking getting so disoriented? Did his shedding have anything to do with it? I don't mind helping you, Logan insisted, as much to himself as to Janus at this point. He couldn't risk getting confused again, not when he was getting close to knowing how to help. Please, don't strain yourself any more than... No. I can do this. I can. It was like Janice's breathing got stuck in his throat. Another couple of scales starting to peel off his skin by themselves, a slimy yellow texture dripping along his cheeks. Janus gritted his teeth, tears forming in the corner of his eyes as he let out his first sob. Naturally, from the little tugs he was making at his gloves, it didn't slide off his hand. Frustrated, Janus clutched onto the gloves with all his fingers so tightly that Logan was momentarily worried the sudden surge in strength would make him rip his glove, perhaps even tear into his skin. Damn it. I can't do this. I need help. I'm weak. Janus sobbed raggedly, almost begging as tears started to mix with the yellow fluid dripping in between his torn scales. Before Janus had any chance to protest, Logan grabbed his right hand and started to remove his glove himself. Next step. Just follow this next step. You are not weak for needing help, Janus. Janus didn't seem to agree. He let out an empty chuckle, shaking his head, though as he was too physically exhausted to resist, he allowed Logan to take his right glove off and place it on top of his capelet. His hand felt clammy as well, as Logan held on to it. He wanted to move on to the other, when Janus clutched onto his fingers and pinched them. Lie to me. What? Logan's hand was shaking from Janus's firm grip, instilling in him yet another wave of unsettling uncertainty. Just as he was starting to think he found an approach that seemed to work, but Logan knew he had no choice but to listen, or rather, he wouldn't allow himself not to listen. He needed to gather information as it came to him, to learn how to help. When I'm like this, I can't, Janus panted, digging his nails into the back of Logan's hand, his throat filled with choked sobs. I can't stop thoughts spilling out that I normally don't. I normally lie to keep them hidden because... Janus winced, as if disturbed by his own thoughts. Something about his hurting expression made Logan's chest tighten, grabbing onto Janus's hand with his other in an attempt to calm him. He felt a need arise in himself to do more, with a decreasing need to know what or why exactly. He kept rubbing Janus's sweaty hand, seeing his red cheeks and watery eyes beggingly looking back at him. Because it makes me feel so weak and pathetic, and I should have control over them. So please, just doesn't matter what you say, just feed me lies to coat those hurting, honest thoughts in my head. It's just so hot, and I'm scared, and I was not taking a break from work just now. It was an oddly uncomfortable feeling, telling such a blatant lie, perhaps mainly because at any other moment, Logan would have found it completely unreasonable to lie about such a simple fact. Another reason he couldn't quite grasp why Janus always felt the need to do so. But as it seemed, the best next step in his approach, Logan had copied the exact behavior, to the point of enunciating certain words just like Janus did. A short sense of relief and clarity washed over Janus's face as he breathed out and stopped clutching Logan's hand. He gave him the smallest nod, which in any other situation could have meant anything, and Logan wouldn't have been able to tell, since he wasn't particularly skilled at seeking out and understanding small emotional clues. And yet, he knew he could move on to remove Janus's other glove, the one that, presumably, would be scaled too, just like the left side of his face. I, in fact, was procrastinating, very irresponsibly, and figured I would delay work even more by not taking a walk to grab a drink. In any other situation, Logan would have felt ridiculous telling such an obvious lie, but he felt his chest opening up, contented as he watched Janus's expression soften. Even when Logan took off his other glove to reveal his scaled hand, heavily tattered and worn, signs of scratch marks, and another loose layer of scales beginning to peel. Janus bit his lip as he stared down, seemingly embarrassed. Though as Logan kept holding on to his hand after he put the glove on the growing stack of Janus's garments, Janus let out a gentle huff and smiled. It was working. The steps were working. Logan knew what he was doing. He was helping. He was feeling useful again. The same kind of concentration coming back to him like he felt while at work, since his work was something he knew for sure would allow him to be useful, unlike dealing with other issues, complicated issues, emotional issues, that all the others had much better knowledge of than him. It made perfect sense they wouldn't value his input. It made sense they would rather ignore him when such situations arose. It was reasonable they had stayed quiet today, minding their own business, likely their emotional business, not letting Logan in on how their day was going, which meant, "I am devastated no one has gone to check on me yet, to catch me procrastinating." The expression on Janus's face changed. He wasn't smiling anymore. He glanced at Logan, mouth slightly open as his panting increased. Logan looked away. Since he had no reason to worry, he was still lying to make Janus feel better, to be useful to him. And now I continue feeling bothered by the fact that why did this blatant, careless lie not leave Logan's lips that easily anymore? Why did he feel the need to hesitate? He knew what he was doing. They wouldn't have cared less if I was doing my work or not, if I in fact was feeling tired or neglected or... He shouldn't have felt a need to pause. He was just lying to help Janus, after all. But for some reason, he felt more and more like he was figuratively dropping his act or flubbing his lines, which shouldn't make any sense since he was only... That wasn't a lie. Janus's voice sounded small and frail, losing the sense of calm he had established in his demeanor moments ago. "No, I really... Honey, I told you, I can tell if you're lying, especially now." Janus swallowed again, his gaze burning on Logan's forehead that left him no choice but to meet it with his own. "Truth hurts, doesn't it?" Janus's words hit Logan like a figurative dagger to his chest. It emptied his throat of saliva to keep it from drying out, the corners of his eyes prickling. Logan would normally feel ridiculous for the thought even crossing his mind. Not like he didn't understand the concept of empathy, but he never considered himself one to be able to metaphorically place themselves in someone else's shoes. He was his own side. The others were theirs, after all. Though, as he saw Janus's scaled layer of skin peeling off again, Janus letting go of Logan's hand to start picking at his left cheek, tears mixing with yellow essence smeared on his cheekbones, that withering away of a safety net, so to say, an extra layer of skin, a protection from judgmental comments and gazes from the outside while keeping hurting honesties whirling inside, and now it was all starting to shed. This was something familiar to Logan. Something he recognized. He empathized with Janus. And that hurt. "I'm sorry if I'm hurting you," Janus whispered, panting in between as his eyes started to flutter shut and he rocked his body forward a little. "You can just go. This will pass after a while." "No, Logan muttered, sliding an inch closer to Janus. He unfolded his legs from underneath him to stretch them on either side of Logan, and Logan instinctively held out his palms toward Janus to catch him in case he plunged forward in exhaustion. "I want to help you, be of use to you, and, frankly, I don't want to be alone right now either." "Well then," was all Janus got across his lips, before indeed letting his body lean forward till his head landed on Logan's chest. With Janus nestling his right cheek against his thigh, grabbing onto his shirt with both bare hands, Logan supported himself with his left hand behind him on the ground while wrapping his right arm around Janice's shoulders. Considering his sweating and shedding, the embrace was considerably hotter and clammier than he was expecting a hug to be like. Then again, truthfully, he had no intention of letting go. He didn't even consider what his next steps would be. "Don't mind me being a little needy," Janice panted, continuing to scratch his cheek as Logan tried rubbing his shoulder. "That's all right," Logan replied, growing a shiver in his tone of voice. Not that he would be able to repress it if he tried. Maybe he would try shedding some more as well. "Like I said, I may be in need of some company myself." "I'm worse," Janus chuckled with a strained cough, his body spazzing against Logan's chest for a second. "Why do you think I keep pulling you guys' strings all the time? Without you to control, I'd be left with nothing. No one. And to be met with their disdain because of that behavior would be better than indifference, correct?" Logan answered softly, feeling an odd tugging of familiarity in his chest as Janus was rubbing his cheek against it in a nod. Logan always imagined Janus as the one most capable of self-reliance, that his manipulative acts were all the more proof of that. But perhaps that was more of a facade than he assumed. A similar facade Logan himself may have put up to protect whatever honesties he wanted to protect. Thinking back on it, keeping that facade intact took him some considerable energy at times. To not lash out as he was ignored, or not ask for reassurance when he passed Roman or Patton down the hallway. Sometimes he even caught himself thinking that, even though it may be painful in the moment, cumulatively it could prove less painful to voice those honesties. Though the thought of that, ridiculous. It wasn't like he could even be as close to brutally honest as someone like, "Oh shit, already?" It was Remus who came to turn around the corner. Logan met his eyes with sensible embarrassment, not aware of how much Remus had heard of their conversation, nor ready to accept anyone else seeing Logan this vulnerable. "I should have left the imagination earlier. Sorry, Janny," Remus said in a surprisingly soft voice, kneeling down next to them and raking his hand through Janice's hair. He didn't even as much as question Logan being there, which Logan couldn't help but appreciate. Janice shivered and groaned, tugging on Logan's shirt as his tie continued getting soaked from the loose scales and tears and essence. "Luckily, you got a handsome nerd taking care of you." Remus grinned as Janice glanced at him, after which Remus gave Logan a firm pat on the back. It managed to shake the remainder of embarrassment off of him. "Thanks." Only at that line did Remus meet Logan's eyes, a gaze filled with a faint twinkle of gratefulness that Logan for some reason was able to interpret. "No problem. I'm glad I could help." Logan nodded. Remus looked back at Janice, sliding his hand down to rub the peeling layers of scaled skin off his cheek. "You even got the shedding to go faster. Consider me impressed, Lo." Remus smirked provocatively, making Logan involuntarily blush a little. Normally, he would never have considered Remus to be such a comforting presence as he experienced now. The both of them, actually. "How you feeling, Jan?" Remus asked, continuing to stroke through his hair as Janus rocked his head along with it. "Really hot. Like it burns more than normal, and weak, because I think I might start crying for real this time." A strained sob left Janus's mouth as he nestled more closely into Logan's embrace. Logan hugged him tighter in response, not sure if it was an instinctual movement, a need for comfort. He stroked Janus's shoulder, placing his chin on his head as Remus pulled his hand back from Janus's hair. "It's about damn time you did, instead of sucking it up like always." Remus chuckled, patting Janus's back calmly. Logan kept being surprised by the amount of honest, gentle care that was tangible between the two of them. It felt like something Logan had not known he'd been missing, since it made him not want to leave their side. to the degree that he breathed in worriedly as Remus grabbed Janus by both his shoulders, breaking him away from their hug. "Let's get you to your room, huh?" Remus softly suggested, and Logan couldn't deny the hint of the ever-familiar neglect as he felt Janus's weight pulled off him and into Remus's arms, until Remus shot a glance at him. "You're free to join us for a threesome, if you want," he winked, leaving Logan this close to brushing off the statement as one of Remus's usual suggestive comments until he felt a tugging at his tie. "It seems Jan wants you to come and help him anyway." It was indeed Janus tugging, pursing his lips together as his body trembled from choking sobs, his eyes watery as he gave Logan a begging look, as if he truly wanted him there. And like Janus said before, judging by the quickening shed, this could really be the honesty spilling out. Just like the thought that Logan wanted to be wanted. Like this. Swallowing a sob of his own, Logan smiled and nodded. "Of course. I'd be happy to help him through the rest of his shedding, if you don't mind my company."
"Hell nah. Been wanting for an opportunity to win you over, Lo."
Remus grinned again as he put his arm under Janus's and threw one of Janus's arms over his shoulder, ready to lift him up. Logan crawled backwards to stand up and give the two space, just now noticing how much his legs were aching from folding them this whole time.
"Unless you got more important, boring paperwork to get done,"
Remus huffed, getting on his feet while carefully supporting Janus in his arms, who could barely support himself on his shaking legs. Though, throughout, Janus kept holding on to Logan's tie, still soaked, clutched by a scaled left hand which had started to show a new shiny layer of skin. Logan wrapped his hand around Janus's as he gave Remus a shrug. "Not really. Work can wait." Thank you all for listening. Again, this story was Truth Hurts, Doesn't It? I didn't read the tags before I read this one in preparation of picking which stories I wanted to read, and I was so excited to see a shedding story because those used to be super popular in the fandom and they just aren't nearly as popular anymore. I do hope y'all enjoyed it. Make sure to go show Lost in Scribbles some love on AO3 or on Tumblr, and I hope you have a wonderful day.